Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is still in the United States. He'll be addressing the joint houses of the U.S. Congress in a bid to bolster support for his war in the Gaza Strip. Netanyahu's invite was initiated by the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, whose party is trying to show unflinching support for Israel. However, several Democratic lawmakers plan to boycott the address over the levels of U.S. military assistance to Israel, given the huge numbers of Palestinians killed. He arrived in the U.S. on Monday after addressing Congress on Wednesday. He'll be meeting with President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, and then have a separate meeting with Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. Meanwhile, dozens of relatives of those taken hostage in Gaza protested near the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. This was on Tuesday, urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to finalize a deal to bring them home. On the eve of Netanyahu's speech, family members held pictures of their loved ones.
We don't know anything about Keith. We don't know if he's alone. But we do know that he's in Gaza, thrown on the floor like a rag, and all human rights have been taken from him. He's not even allowed to feel, because when you feel and you're sad, you get screamed at. You're not allowed to talk because you have to shut up. You have to beg for water. We need this world to be a better world for everybody, for the people in Gaza that are good, for the people in Israel that are good. We need to stop this war. I'm begging Bibi, help. We need the 120 hostages out.
You're seeing here the faces of people that met her loved ones when they came back from captivity. Carmel is still there right now and can be out in a deal. In 2 weeks, Geffen can hug Carmel at the same smile she had when she hugged Yarden. This is something that can happen in 2 weeks from now. We just need this deal to be sealed right now. Right now, this deal needs to be sealed, and we know that there is one person that needs to decide that this deal needs to be sealed, and this is Benjamin Netanyahu. He needs to decide not to delay this deal, and we are here to remind him that. Seal that deal right now.
In the meantime, pro-Palestinian Jewish demonstrators also staged a protest inside Capitol Hill's Cannon Builder Rotunda ahead of Prime Minister Netanyahu's address to Congress today. U.S. President Joe Biden and the Prime Minister are expected to discuss, it's much later, a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas militants in Gaza, as well as Iran and other topics. It will be Biden's first meeting with a foreign leader since he opted not to run for re-election and endorse Vice President Kamala Harris as his successor as the Democratic presidential nominee. I want to bring in Israeli businessman Rotem Cohen. He is currently holidaying in Portugal, but still keeping tabs on what's going on back home. Rotem, thanks for making time to join us on the program. You're supposed to be out enjoying the sun and enjoying all things holiday, but this is an important conversation, isn't it? And I know that a lot of Israelis are looking out looking forward to what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be discussing with the U.S. president. What are some of the expectations that people hope will be the outcome of this meeting?
First of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here, and it's a short holiday just to have a little getaway from the situation. And our expectations is for Benjamin Netanyahu to speak in front of the houses. It is necessary to mobilize the American public opinion. A speech before the houses of Congress is a significant platform for us to convey the Israeli narrative in the best way possible. So
And what is, we're looking at those pictures of families who still have their loved ones held in captivity in Gaza, calling on the Prime Minister to sign this deal. That's the peace deal, the ceasefire deal that should ensure that they also return home. It breaks our hearts, seeing those pictures, but it also, makes you wonder if people really understand the intricacies of what the Prime Minister is faced with, not just bringing the hostages home, he's also negotiating Israel's future.
Exactly. We feel, first of all, it is very necessary to bring them home. We all want it. And I'm sure Benjamin Netanyahu want it too. I'm not familiar with the details because they are not exposed to the public. However, I do know that as the military pressure on Hamas intensified, Hamas will more likely to compromise, and hopefully it will make room for negotiation. Maybe, and more important is to bring them back home, and maybe to stop the war and the bloodshed.
Now, the Gaza Health Ministry has been updating the rest of the world on the situation in Gaza, the death tolls, as well as the people killed, where the targets have been held. The latest has been in Khan Yunis. They've called for action, trying to draw world attention to this. But I'm wondering what sort of propaganda is filtering into Israel, from Gaza about the situation there.
We know exactly what is going on over there. We are there to bring them home back, all the people that are being held as hostages. That's our number one goal. And secondly, to take down the Hamas regime and to bring back democracy, room for a regime that will respect the international laws. So from our side, we see that and we feel for them, but we have our own people over there, and it's very simple. Bring them home back, and then it will make our life easier to negotiate to improve the situation in Gaza.
What is the real attitude of the Israelis towards this war? Because I do understand, the people are more concerned about the hostages who have been held in Israel. But after those hostages are returned, the hostilities continue between Israel and Hamas, because Hamas wouldn't still have been eliminated. What do Israelis think about, what the future could look like, living side by side with these militants?
First of all, I don't think there's any dry eye in Israel. We want them home. We want the still hostages being held. And I think it touches almost every family in Israel. Everyone has a beloved one that is close to an hostage, or it's a small country. You need to understand. We want them home. That's what we want. We want to go back to the 6th of October and to have our people back home. That's our number one. Everybody agree on that. There's no argument. About the war, we believe that we shouldn't live next to a terror organization regime. We don't think it's right. Most of the people, of course, you have people against and people that they are supporting. But the majority, I believe, understand that we can't allow it to happen again, to have another 20 years of dropping of mortars and rockets on Israeli cities and Israeli kibbutz and moshav. It's simply unacceptable anymore to most of the people in Israel. I think there's no argument about that.
As we close this conversation, Rotem, has the war impacted on daily lives, apart from the absence of, these loved ones who are still being held in Gaza? Has the war impacted on regular business, everyday life in Israel?
Yes, it is. There's a great impact on our lives. We cannot untie ourselves even if we don't have a direct connection to somebody who lost his life or held in hostage. But of course, you see, business-wise, of course, there is a slowdown. Israel is a very strong nation, and I believe we shall prevail, and we will bring them back home and we do what's necessary to recover. Because since Yom Kippur, there's no such a disaster. I think ever since the Holocaust, there's no such a disaster that hit and the public, the Israelis, such as that event, and it's very, very hard for us to recover, but I'm sure we will.
Rotem, thanks again for spending time with us on the program, speaking with us about the situation in Israel.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back. We're expecting any moment now that address by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate, the joint session of the House. We understand some Democrats are planning to boycott, that address because he's supposed to be pitching his own perspectives for U.S. decision on the negotiations with Hamas on a possible ceasefire coming up in a few days. Let's bring in now Channels Television's Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, to give us some insights into this and some updates. Maria, great to see you. When exactly is the Israeli Prime Minister expected to address Congress?
Yes, thank you, Amarachi. He is expected to address Congress at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So in a little less than 2 hours from now, he will be addressing Congress. Now, this expected address is going to, as you said, give his perspective on the war, obviously, where he believes the U.S. should be supporting some of the thoughts and perspectives from Israel. And this is one that I think is going to be extremely controversial. At this time, we know right now there are protesters outside of Congress, outside the U.S. Capitol. There are hundreds of police that are blocking and barricading that area to ensure safety and security. There are all types of streets blocked off in Washington. And so the number of security measures that are in place are extremely heightened in comparison to what we saw just a few days ago. We know that the vice president will not be in attendance at this address, and we know about 30 other lawmakers will not be in attendance as well. So this is coming at a time that I think is one that the U.S. has obviously been very divided on the issue, and specifically at a time when we know this U.S. election has taken quite a turn. And so this is one of those issues that is at the forefront of many Americans in their thoughts around where they're going to vote.
It also, impacts on the situation in Gaza because, the Israeli hostages still being held there. Many people want their loved ones to return home. So will he also be addressing that issue? Because I know that a number of them in the U.S. did approach him yesterday while he was in Washington, also imploring on him to work towards bringing those hostages home. I don't know if you saw the videos that we put up just before this conversation when I was talking before. I also spoke to Rotem, the hostages' families, talking about how they don't have water, they don't have access to human rights, the desire to have them home. It all seems like, these people are a bit, they want, they just want the hostages home, not particularly thinking about the future of Israel after that.
You're exactly correct. There is a very not only tight relationship between the U.S. and Israel as it relates to foreign relations, but it's also a tight relationship because there are many Americans that have family members in Israel. There are many Americans, honestly, that have family members in Palestine, which is where the large divide comes. And so when you say those hostages are being requested to come home, that has been since the beginning of the war. We continue day after day. You can drive all throughout Washington in front of the Israel embassy. You can go downtown, and there are constant protests. We know we talked about a few months back when the protests outside of the colleges and how many colleges actually ended up foregoing their graduations because of the very divided and the number of protests and the security measures. And so we know this has been a very heightened, a very heated, a very strong point of contention here in the U.S. I know you all have been sharing some of what you're seeing inside of the Capitol. Obviously, we are a country that believes in the freedom of speech. And so that's where this becomes a very challenging situation for lawmakers and really for law enforcement, trying to ensure people have the freedom of speech, but also ensuring the security of the other Americans who are not protesting, making sure that they are safe and secure, and also ensuring that there's no conflict between those who are pro-Palestine and pro-Israel. So this is a very delicate situation. And this is a time, as you said, that these individuals have loved ones that are in hostage situations. And as you mentioned, the food, the water, and we're obviously hearing on the side of those who are pro-Palestine that their loved ones have been without food and water and basic necessities for many years. And so this is something that I think the American government has obviously been very much a part of, but it also has become very divided about how the U.S. government should be supporting and in which way they should be supporting the obviously peaceful resolution to this war.
The topic will also be front and center, for the presidential debates, I suppose, and for the campaigns as Vice President Kamala Harris hits the campaign trail. I'm expecting to hear, her thoughts and her opinions on what she will do if she becomes president regarding the war in Gaza and U.S. support for Israel. Do we know where she stands? Because I really haven't heard any extensive conversation about it from her. Do we understand, her thought process about this?
What we're likely going to hear, I can guarantee you that her campaign team is working right now to identify what is going to be the messaging, because they know that she's going to have to come out with messaging around the war and where she stands on this, and not only where the administration stands, because as you said, right now she is a candidate for presidency. So where she stands in that, because that's going to have a huge impact on the voter base. But we know that there will be general conversations and topics around safety and security, peaceful resolution, the need to respect all humanity, whether Israel or Palestinian. And so that is Israeli or Palestinian. That's, I think, going to be the initial point. But I do believe that her campaign team is really figuring out, which is why she's not going to be there today. We can't guarantee that's why she's not going to be there today, but we know that her presence there today would send a signal to Americans and to voters of where she stands. And so her absence today really allows her to be able to come up with her exact stance on the war moving forward.
The former president, Donald Trump, is a staunch supporter of Israel. I mean, he was the one that moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, declaring it, the capital of Israel. We've seen, his being a bit more vocal about his support in Israel, but he does not support the war, from my understanding. What sort of messaging would be coming from the Republican camp regarding this?
Well, we know that the Republicans typically have been in support of Israel. And so even from the political base of the Republicans, the former president having, to your point, the position that he is supportive of Israel, even though he's not in support of the war, I think is very much in alignment with the base of the party. And so he doesn't really have to defer from that. I think that he can continue that messaging and continue the support of those within his party. You very rarely will hear a lot of pro-Palestinian subject matter experts, supporters in the Republican base, and those that are, it's a very smaller group. And so I'm sure they're not as concerned as the Democratic Party is, because right now the unity within the party, and we know that especially the younger generation in the U.S., those who are voting just for the first time, many of those have definitely expressed their anger oftentimes, but also their disagreement with the current administration's position with the war.
I know that, the evangelicals have been big supporters of the former U.S. President Donald Trump, and a lot of them rejoiced, when the American embassy was moved to Jerusalem. A lot of them are also supporters of Israel. What have they been saying, about this war, the humanity, that should govern our thoughts, our opinions, our words, regarding this war?
We know that the church community, the evangelicals, as we've mentioned, have definitely changed some of their commentary, their conversations around the war, even though they are pro-Israel and they have supported Israel for quite some time. I think that the messaging around the humanity, as you mentioned, the messaging around the safety and security for all people has become the focal point for the church community. And I think that will continue to be the point of conversation. And I think if we look at the conversations that will happen today and the address that will happen today on Congress, there will be congressional members that are going to focus in on the messaging around the humanity components. If we look at the history of the U.S. and how they supported global affairs and wars across the country, they focus majority on humanitarian efforts. And that has been the longstanding reputation for the United States. And so I think we'll continue that messaging. And I think that President Netanyahu understands that and knows that he will have to definitely look at the humanitarian perspective as a prime minister for Israel.
You're in Washington, Maria. Do be careful out there. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.